and this will be the second video on the most confusing doctrine I think I've encountered thus far in Seventh-day Adventism, and that is the 144,000. The first video, if you haven't seen it, I'll link it below, features 65 years of confusing and contradictory Ellen White teachings on the 144,000. What a great way to start a video off with good old confusing Ellen White. Stay with me until the end of this video. I am going to show how Adventism defines the character traits of these 144,000. Two of these character traits at the end of this video. If I was to say them now, you would not believe me unless you've seen them, and you're going to see them at the end of the video. They are just bizarre. So stay with me till the end of the video. But first, let's do a quick review. Here's Ellen White, Mrs. I am so confused. The 144,000 are everything, what, from living saints to, if Ellen Wallace, she finishes faithfully, she can be one. The sealing time is short, it's almost over, etc. To 1901, it's of no spiritual value to be part of the 144,000. But in 1849, Ellen White was told she was going to be one if she was faithful, so I guess it was a spiritual value. On and on and on. This is just a confusing mess. What is clear from my study of this is that this doctrine was confusing and unclear at her death. You would think that her, as the grand seer and prophetess, of course she was more than a prophet, of the church, would have defined it. Then you wouldn't have needed this book, which I featured in the first video. This little booklet here, published in 1916 by J.N. Loughborough, called Questions on the Sealing Message. This wouldn't have been needed for him to try to explain this after Ellen White's death. And of course, he says in this booklet that he published it independently because he knew the Review and Herald or Pacific Press likely didn't want to touch it because it's such a controversial issue. So some of the things you're going to see in this video are, you're going to see this book here, which is, I think it's Testimony. I think it's number 5. Yep, volume 5 of Testimonies. And you're going to see a lot of magazines. Now, in Adventism, there's lots of confused Mildreds, as you see here. Our Mildred, our confused Adventist, who was just bombarded with all these wild, bizarre, contradictory teachings. It would be one thing if the 144,000 teaching just ended with Ellen White and the nonsense that she said that you saw earlier in the review, but it doesn't. Adventists are still trying to figure this out. And because they're still trying to figure it out, they say some of the most bizarre and wacky things. Again, you're going to see them near the end of this video. But here's what we do know. God is not the author of confusion, but we know that Seventh-day Adventism and Ellen White are. Now, I'm going to start this video off just addressing the number of 144,000. I'm going to address it in this sense here. Does Adventism teach a literal 144,000 or figurative 144,000? Well, in true Adventist fashion, they teach both, and you're going to see them here. Adventism is so confused. Let's start off with defining the 144,000. All right, now we're going to start off with examining this 144,000 literal or not literal number. Look at this quote. I love this quote. The remnant and its people, which will be gathered at his coming, will be 144,000. Just the number will be needed. Literal number. Look at the second part. The definite number in the purpose of God must be of a certain character. This is God's number, is what they're telling us here. Strictly God's number. Let's add another one to it here. And what does this one say? From 1897, the number 144,000 must be a definite number, composed of just so many individuals. It can't be a larger one. Why? Because if it was, then John would have said so. But John didn't say so, did he? Very literal number. Let's go to the next one. This is one of my favorite ones. From a fairly modern magazine, recounting some history for us. When Haskell returned from Australia to America in 1899, he was amazed to find some Adventists intent on having babies. And the reason, why did they want to have babies? To make up the 144,000 so Jesus would come. So what is the 144,000? You hit this number, Jesus comes. It's a magic number. There it is. It's magic. Just how many people did they have, by the way, in 1899 that they were looking forward to? I went back and found the actual Adventist statistics off the archive site. There were 64,000 Adventists in 1899. So they think they're going to have a bunch of babies and then they're going to make Adventists. Let's just move up a few years, about 5 years after 1899, because up to 1904. If the next 10 years, so now they're projecting out their growth rate. sees the same kind of progress, then they say, we're going to have 144,000 Adventists on the earth. Well, how many did they have in 1904? Well, in 1904, they had 81,000. Remember back in 1899, there were 64,000. Now they got 81,000. Now they can see 144,000. It's in striking distance, and they think they can actually achieve it. And when they do, remember, Jesus is supposed to come. So let's look at the next one. And again, a fairly modern magazine, 1940s. And this one here, the early believers, I think, and all I got to say is, really, you think? Why don't you just go back and read the literature like I did, whoever WAS was back then? I think they took the prophetic numbers literal in those days. No kidding. Let's keep reading here. And then it goes, so they looked for more than 100,000 souls to accept the faith who hadn't been in the work since 1844. Yeah, 144,000, literal, God's number. Jesus is coming when we hit it. Well, when did they actually hit 144,000? So I went and looked, and here we are in 1916. Oh, look at this. We're so close to 144. We're 141 in 1916. Well, 1917, we hit 153, meaning, ta-da, sometime in 1916, 144,000 was achieved. I don't know, is it time for celebration or is it really time for a change? Because now that 144,000 members have been achieved, Christ didn't return. You know what? This is like the second great disappointment, because nothing happened when they hit 144,000 members, except the calendar date just changed. Jesus didn't come back. This is just like 1844. So what happens in Adventism when you have a disappointment and your prophecies turn out false? Well, you just redefine your doctrine. And we can see that starting to happen right here in 1920. We're going to read a few quotes in this paragraph here. A number of our people seem to be perplexed regarding the 144,000. Like, no kidding, they're perplexed. Let's keep reading. The next sentence. So they're discussing the manner of and counting and wondering whether the 144,000, well, maybe the 144,000 is just the heads of families and it doesn't include the wives and the children as the ancient custom of Israel. And then we're going to read this third sentence here that says, there's some who even express the opinion, well, the 144,000 is a number applying, it's figurative. And it's going to be going back to the beginning. This is 1920, so now they know they got a crisis. They're well past 144,000 in 1920. Just how far past 144,000? In 1920, this had 185,000 members. You're 41,450 over 144,000, and Jesus didn't come. You know what that means in Adventism? It's time to smash the panic button. Act now. Crisis. What do we do? Because those that are alive, that you just saw in that 1920 article, they all knew that the 144,000 was taught previously as a literal number. Jesus didn't come. Nothing happened. What do we do? This doctrine's unclear. Smash the panic button. But like I said, in Adventism, when prophecies fail, just change the doctrine and make it unfail. And look what they started doing in 1928 to 1935. Look at these paragraphs. They are all darn near identical. 144,000 is symbolic rather than literal. 144,000 is ideal or symbolic rather than literal. 144,000 is ideal rather than literal, and it's ideal rather than literal. It's ideal rather than strictly literal. Look at these paragraphs. Look closely at them. Pause the video. They're identical. Just change a word here or there, but here's the message. We are going to pound 144,000, not literal, into the Adventist head. And they started pounding here in 1928, and we can see the same paragraph highlighted in 1935. So what does all this mean? Well, back in 1889, this was God's number. It was God's definite number. Now in 1928, it's not God's definite number. It's symbolic. It's not literal. God changed. So in Adventism, I want to say God does change. Let's move on to the next topic. Here we are, keeping the Sabbath. Well, you know what? Keeping the Sabbath alone is not enough to get you into the 144,000. We're going to look at Testimonies, Volume 5, pages 213 and page 214. And on the next, I'm going to move them around so you can see the paragraphs, the quotes together. And here they are. Ellen White says, not all who profess to keep the Sabbath will be sealed. In other words, not all are going to be part of the 144,000. There are many among those who teach the truth. You're teaching others to do it, but you're not going to receive the seal of God in your forehead. All right, so there are faithful Sabbath keepers who will not be part of the 144,000, will not be sealed. They had the light of truth. They knew their master's will. They understood every point of faith, but they had not corresponding works. Oh, so even if you keep the Sabbath and you don't do other works, which she doesn't define here for us, you're not going to be part of the 144,000. Well, you know what she just taught us? You got to work, Seventh-day Adventist. You must work to be part of the 144,000. What's the Bible say? To be saved, it's not of your own doing. Well, Ellen White's telling you it is. Ellen White just contradicts Ephesians 2:8. But let's keep on here and learn some more character of the 144,000. The 144,000 may therefore be a representative company. So now we know that not every Adventist is going to be part of the 144,000. It's a representative company because not everyone's there. Let's keep reading down the same paragraph. The real important thing for us to know is not just the exact number which will be saved, but whether we're going to be part of that number. In other words, are we going to be part of the super special Adventist? Let's have them tell us more about the super special Adventist. So the 144,000, they're a special company. The 144 are presented as a select and special class of God's servants. Read that closely, Seventh-day Adventist. A select and special class. That's 1950. Let's look at 1989. Not every professed Christian will be sealed. Of course, we just saw that. They're teaching Ellen White right here without teaching Ellen White or citations of hers. It does not follow that everyone who bears the name Christian will be numbered in that group. So all Seventh-day Adventists, you will not be part of this group. How are they identified? Oh, I love this. They're identified on the basis of their service to God. And they're characterized by their faithfulness, obedience, and loyalty. Let that sink in, because what are they just saying here? That we have now two classes of Adventists. We got the first class Adventists, which are the super elite spiritual ones who are faithful, obedient, and loyal to God and do their works. And then we got everyone else. She did it. Adventism, you did it again. You're doing it through works. To be part of the 144,000, you have to be your service to God. You got to be faithful. You got to be obedient. You got to be loyal. And the Bible says, sorry, it's not of your own doing at all. But in Adventism, it certainly is. We got the You're So Special group because you're service, obedient, loyal, and etc. And then there's everyone else. Adventism is a two-class structure now. Now that we know Sabbath keeping is not enough, the 144,000, the special group, are chosen because their service, their faithfulness, their obedience, their loyalty, their works. Now let's look at some even more very interesting characteristics of the 144,000. I like this one. Now the Lord is going to give out 144,000 tickets to those living on earth. There it is, your golden ticket. By the way, angels get gold cards, 144,000 get tickets. I'm just assuming they're golden tickets, by the way, so I'm reading into the text here. I want to note that something about these tickets. They're given to the living on earth. Think about that for a minute. Now, this is 1889 to the living on earth. If they're living on earth, Ellen White died in 1915. She didn't get a ticket. Maybe she's probably not part of the 144,000. She's not one of the super spiritual Seventh-day Adventists. So, hey, Seventh-day Adventists, do me a favor. When you go to congregation, when you go to Sabbath, this Sabbath, start asking members, who's got a ticket in their pocket that proven that they're part of the 144,000. I want to see one of those tickets. By the way, if you have one, let me know because I want to see one. Let's go on to the next character of the 144,000. The 144,000, they're going to get special light because they develop special character. Oh, and then it says whether there will be others beside this exact number. Well, that's an open question. Special light. Does this mean they're going to get revelation like Ellen White? Now, Seventh-day Adventists, when you find a ticket-carrying member in your congregation this Sabbath, you got to ask them what kind of special light they receive. Interesting. Let's go to the next characteristic of the 144,000. Every Seventh-day Adventist who finally stand among the 144,000 will have been proved in the matter of paying tithes and performing other duties. Payment required to be part of the 144,000. This is getting complicated now, isn't it? So now you got to pay the tithe. You got to perform other duties. You saw where you got to have service. You got to have faithfulness. You got to have obedience. You got to have loyalty. You got to have a ticket. You got to have special light. Start stacking these up. Are you confused yet? Because you should be. Let's move on to the next one. And I can't review this after every one of these, or this is just an insanely long video. Let's do the next one. Now, just now, the master is he's choosing them now in 1932 to be part of the 144,000 because they will have attained perfection. There's your sinless perfection. And they're going to be immortalized without seeing death. Now, this is 1932. The master is choosing them in 1932. Does that mean tickets from we saw in 1889 are being handed out to those who do not see death? If the master is choosing them in 1932, then he's got to be handing out tickets. But if you were born in 1932, in 2024, you're in excess of 90 years old. That's interesting. So this definitely, I think, is going to be a problem. You're going to have 90-year-olds. But what if they die? Does their ticket get sent to somebody else? Oh, this is so confusing in Adventism. But you know what? I have saved the best for last. These are just absolute gems in terms of the character of the 144,000. By the way, I'm going to review all these at the end because it's easy to get lost here. What about the 144,000? They got a pure religion. They got pure hearts. They got pure minds. They got pure characters. They speak a pure language. That, you know what? They're divine. There's no other way to say it. They got divine hearts. But what's the Bible say? No, you don't. If you're human, what's Jeremiah say? The heart is deceitfully above all things. It's wicked. Who can know it? Yes, our human hearts are wicked. I don't care who you are, me included. The Bible speaks about our hearts, and there it is. Read it and weep. It is not the 144,000. This here elevates them above human status and makes them divine. This is one of my favorite ones about the 144,000 coming up next. While the 144,000 are bodyguards of Christ on Mount Zion, the 144,000 are Christ's bodyguards. This is just craziness here. The same Christ who says, think you that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will presently send me and give me more than 12 legions of angels. But oh, no. The 144,000 say, yeah, move over, angels, move over, Christ, because we're going to be your bodyguards on Mount Zion. Last one, and then we're going to do a review. Here's the last one. Insane. The 144,000 have the character of God, and the 144,000 have the holiness of Christ. They're God. That's it. Pure language, pure heart, pure everything. Now you got the character of God and the holiness of Christ. You are God. Don't you know this is the oldest trick in the book? Starting with Genesis 3, 1 through 5. What did the serpent tell Eve? For God knows that in the day that you eat thereof, then your eyes will be opened, and ye shall be as gods. Or ye shall be as the 144,000, with a divine character of God and the holiness of Christ. This is the oldest trick in the book right here. This adult Sabbath school lesson from 1995 is teaching what we already know can't happen from Genesis 3, and you shall be as gods. I'm sure you, like me, even putting this together, was just lost in all these characters of the 144,000. So let's do a review here. All right, did you get lost in all these doctrinal changes, detailed requirements and descriptions to be part of the 144,000? I did, even putting this together. It's like one requirement after another just keeps adding to the list. No wonder the average Adventist cannot explain this doctrine. Because, I mean, literally, I had to read, it's somewhere in excess of 2,000 quotes. When I searched all my magazines for 144,000, it was somewhere in excess of 2,000 quotes that I had to read just to gather this material. And, you know, there's even more. There's stuff that I didn't put in the video that I could have put in the video. So no wonder. This is absolutely a confusing doctrine. With that said, let's review what you just watched. You saw first that it was God's literal definite number. And then, well, the SDA God changed his mind and said, nah, it's not a literal number. It's a symbolic, ideal, figurative number. So I guess the Seventh-day Adventist God does change. Then we saw in 1899, oh, here the Adventists are. They said, we got to get to 144,000. So what do? Make babies. Isn't that funny? Adventism. So just literal in that sense. But when did they hit 144,000? You saw that between 1916 and 1917. They received, 144,000 was achieved, and what happened? Nothing. Crickets. The sun came up the next day, it was shining, it went down the next night, Jesus didn't return, nothing happened. So by 1920, Adventists were scratching their head going, we know what you were teaching before, Review and Herald, Signs of the Times. You were teaching that the 144,000 is just a magic number and like something's going to happen. But here we are in 1920. We have 185,000 members now, or 41,000 over 144,000, and nothing happened. So in Adventism, what do? Just like they did in 1844, when the prophecy failed in 1844. Well, when 144,000 is achieved and nothing happens, what do? You just change the definition of the doctrine. So in 1920, you saw that article when Adventists start questioning, well, maybe the number's not literal. Or maybe the number is just counting the men, and then the women and the children aren't counted, but are part of the number, etc. Well, then you saw from 1928 to 1935, just literally pound it into the Adventist head, 144,000, not literal, symbolic, it's an ideal number. Then you saw from the good old seer and prophet who defined something here for us in terms of 144,000, and that was Sabbath keeping is not enough. In other words, if you're just a good old Sabbath keeping Adventist, you may not be chosen to be part of the 144,000 because it's a special select group, and you got to do special select things to be part of it. You got to do your works, and if you're not doing your works, you're not going to be part of the 144,000. And so now we know, we saw in other articles that the 144,000, it's not all Adventist. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you as an Adventist are going to be a bad Adventist. You can be a good Adventist, but you're not chosen. It's a select group within the larger group, meaning Adventism is two classes. You got your super spiritual elite, that's your 144,000, and then everyone else. So Adventism is a two-class structure. That's really what this doctrine teaches. So to be part of the 144,000, you also saw in this video that you got to perform certain works. You got to do your services to God, whatever services to God is, but that's what it says. But you have to do works of faithfulness, obedience, and loyalty. And then you saw, now here's the wackiness starting to kick in, that you saw in the 1889 article that God is going to promise 144,000 tickets. So God is a heavenly ticket distributor to the 144,000. God is picking and choosing who's going to get one of the 144,000 limited tickets. I just assumed the tickets were gold, like I said, because after all, angels get gold cards, so 144,000 must get gold tickets. And then we saw in 1932, it said God is now choosing the 144,000, which made me believe, okay, we got Adventists that got tickets in their pockets since 1932. And that's when I encourage you guys, go ask some of your congregation this Sabbath who got a ticket in their pocket. And then we also saw the 144,000 are going to get special light. Well, that sounds very much like Ellen White to me. They're going to get special divine inspiration. I don't know, maybe they're going to stand around and all hold up big Bibles at the same time too to prove their status. Then we also saw you're going to be part of 144,000. You better be paying your tithes. Better be doing that work of paying your tithes. Then we saw the 144,000. You better be sinless because you're going to be sinless when you're chosen. And of course we know 1 John 1:8 says what? If you claim to be without sin, you're a deceiver and the truth isn't in you. So what do I know about the 144,000 and Adventist teaching? It teaches that 144,000 are going to be deceivers and the truth isn't in them because they're going to try to claim that they are sinless. See what I mean? This is all really confusing. 144,000, pure religion, pure heart, pure mind, pure characters, pure language. They're like divine. They are Christ's bodyguards. That was probably one of my favorites. Last one, the 144,000 are divine, God-like beings. Why? Because we saw in that teaching that they have the character of God and the holiness of Christ. That means they're God. Well, here's what I know about this video. This video proves, again, as I've done in 140 plus videos on Adventism, Adventism is not biblical. By the way, Adventists, you love to say, oh, we're biblical. We're the ones that follow the Bible. All right. Well, first of all, go find a Bible because probably about 90% of you never use the Bible when you quote in the comments to me and other people. So go find one. Go buy one. Maybe you're lost and found it in your church has one. Go grab one. And then look it up and find me this. Find me in here in the Bible where it says, God says he's going to hand out 144,000 tickets. Show me that verse. I'll even let you use the clear word. See how nice I am? Use the clear word Bible. Then I want you to find out where the 144,000, now the 144,000 Adventists are Adventist. They're not Jews. They're a special class of Gentiles. They're Adventist. Where 144,000 Adventists are going to have the character of God and the holiness of Christ. Please cite that verse, and again, I'll let you use the clear word. Lastly, show me where 144,000 Seventh-day Adventists in the Bible, or the clear word, are Christ's bodyguards. Ought to be simple enough, right? You saw it in your magazines. It's being taught. That means it's in the Bible, right? Go ahead, get to work. Show us where that is in the comments, please. Or, you know what? Admit what we all already know, and that is Adventism is not biblical, doesn't teach biblical things, and is a religion to be shunned. If you are an honest Adventist, you already know this, and you'll recognize it, and you will get out of this false religion.